Hi. Today, focus question for day 7 is, why was it important for the Allies to invade France at Normandy? Why did we have to invade France at all? Why did we invade at Normandy? Why? So, brief overview, orientation in space and time. The invasion goes from Britain into France. Why is Britain invading France? France is our ally. Britain and the US, which is cut off here, are going to invade France because the Nazis already invaded France back in 1940. The Nazis invaded France, took over, and were controlling it. The Americans and the British are going to come try to kick out the Nazis and free the French. However, it takes about 3 or 4 years of planning before we get there. This map shows you a zoomed in area of this spot right between Britain and France. They're so close together that they're almost touching on this map. Here you can see there's a little bit of space there. Normandy is right here, and the invasions happened from the UK into the mainland here. However, this whole sort of 60-mile area is the entire combat zone for the whole battle. Just to put that into perspective, this 60-mile sort of diameter area, 60 miles is roughly the end of San Francisco to almost Santa Cruz. So 60 miles, it's a pretty big area, but for an area of geography that we're more familiar with, all these events are happening kind of all in the same place. So the question is, what happened? I recommend, if you have no idea what happened at D-Day, watching the first part of the movie Saving Private Ryan, or maybe playing Call of Duty or something like that. But what happened is the giant ships came from the UK, from Britain, full of US, British, Canadian, some French, some Australian, a bunch of troops on the Allies side, and they land on the coast of Normandy. But of course, the big giant ships can't get all the way up there, so the big giant ships empty their troops into little tiny ships. These little tiny ships, or landing craft, come up to the shore like this. The back opens up. The soldiers jump out, wade up onto shore, and fight their way into France. Of course, most of the soldiers landing did not encounter a big open area to walk up onto the coast. Most of them encountered gunfire right away. The vast majority of the first wave of soldiers were shot down as they stepped off the boats. Some boats ran aground a little too far out. The soldiers got out and fell straight down to the bottom of the ocean because they were out too far. They couldn't reach the bottom, carrying 50 pounds, 100 pounds of equipment, etc. Can't really swim. So they fall straight to the bottom of the ocean and drown immediately. Other soldiers getting shot as they step off the boats. Many people don't even make it to the land. People who do get on the land don't have anything to hide behind, and they're getting fired upon on most of the beaches, not like this, which is a photo from a training mission. In most of the places at Normandy, there's a cliff right here with German troops at the top in bunkers shooting down on the very exposed Allies. This might seem like a stupid idea, but it was in fact a really well thought out plan by this guy, Dwight D. Eisenhower. He was in charge of the Joint Forces invasion. D-Day was the largest air, sea, land invasion in history. Like a giant blitzkrieg plus the Navy, minus the drugs. And then after a few days and a few thousand deaths, that 6-mile stretch of coast was taken over, and it started to look more like this. It started to look more like a highway of supplies coming from Britain on ships onto the shore and up into France to support the Allies in their continued push across France. D-Day stands for the day, like the specific day. So the invasion was scheduled for D-Day at H hour, M minute. So the day, D-Day, was the 6th of June, 1944. All right. Question number 2. Why was it top secret? Well, the short answer is the element of surprise is the biggest advantage that we could have against the Nazis. And the planning was top secret because we didn't want them to know when or where we were going to invade. After a while, it became clear because of the tides and because of the direction the war was going when we were going to invade, but it was not clear where. And so The most obvious place to invade from Britain to France is at Calais, this place which is really close together. The ocean's relatively easy to cross. In fact, Dunkirk is right here. That's where they did the evacuation from France to Britain at the beginning of this war. This is the most logical place to invade. Alternatively, maybe down here in Brittany. But right here in Normandy is possibly the stupidest place to invade of all the places in France because of its geography, because the ocean is really choppy right here. There's a lot of rain, a lot of clouds, a lot of storms. So, using air cover like airplanes to bomb is going to be difficult. It's the ocean's very choppy and rocky. It's going to be hard to get ships up close. So it's a stupid place to invade. Because it's a stupid place to invade, it's the place that we chose because we knew that the Germans knew that it was a stupid place to invade, and they thought that we wouldn't do that. So we, the Allies, the US and the British, lead the Germans to believe we're going to invade at Calais. The German Nazi troops, you can see these little red things here, they got a lot of people ready here to counter the invasion. We had some troops posted up here to kind of fake them out and make them think we were getting ready to invade from here. London is here. It all kind of makes sense. We created an entirely fake first US Army group to set up fake stuff up here so that German spies would see that and think it was happening and believe that the attack was going to happen at Calais. We managed to lead the Nazis into believing that the real attack was going to happen here and that there was going to be some sort of like fake out over here, when in reality the fake out was here and the real attack is here. It was top secret because in order for this to work in this really stupid location, we needed the defenders here to be in very small numbers, and we needed them to be not prepared to take on as many soldiers as were coming at them. It worked. The German military had pulled most of the defenders from here and put a lot of them up here in preparation for the invasion. And they'd also pulled a lot of people back here in reserve just in case they needed to deploy them here or here or here. And so our misinformation campaign worked because it led the Germans to put a lot of their troops back here in reserve, waiting for communication for where to go. What was the plan? Okay, the plan is complicated. I'll try to simplify it. Obviously, surprise. And then, because we knew they were keeping a lot of their troops back here inland, this is the Normandy coast with some little pillbox bunkers here on the coast full of German troops. There are a bunch of French towns back here, and there were German troops posted in a lot of these towns waiting to see if they were going to be deployed to Normandy or up to Calais. What does this mean? Well, we decided to drop paratroopers all throughout this area and to use them in the middle of the night before the landing, to cut off communication between these towns, cut off the radio wires, the telephone wires, the power cables, whatever we could, to cut off communication between these places. That way, once the invasion starts, these guys won't be able to call for reinforcements from anywhere. And in fact, all of these places we cut off from each other, so they won't be able to tell each other what's going on. It's a good way to create chaos. Following the paratroopers were going to be gliders, hundreds and hundreds of gliders. There were 13,000 paratroopers dropped and over 500 gliders dropped. Gliders are planes that have no engine and they're kind of towed behind a regular plane. The regular plane lets them go and flies away, and then the glider silently, secretly glides down to the ground. Problem with gliders, they are difficult to steer. They have no engine, so you can't go back up again. And most of them crash landed into these pillars that the U.S. called Rommel's asparagus. The Germans put these up specifically to defend against airplanes and gliders landing in farm fields. So these are called Rommel's asparagus. They're actually just think like telephone poles all over these farms, so that when the gliders crash land, they slam into these, killing the guys inside. Of the 13,000 paratroopers, only about 3,200 survived in one piece to actually carry out their mission. However, 3,200 is still a serious number of people to run around the countryside cutting power lines, and they create quite a bit of chaos. Um, a lot of these gliders crash landed. A lot of the pilots who were flying them got smushed when the Jeeps flew forward when they crashed, but a significant number of the Jeeps did survive, even if the crew of these planes did not. Um, and the main point of the gliders was to get equipment like Jeeps and tanks and stuff like that into France. The main point of the paratroopers was to get guys into France to cut the power, and then once the power and the communication was cut, to meet up with the gliders, to meet up with the guys with the Jeeps, and to start the fight from the inside. There's one famous story, which I have to talk about here, which is at the town of St. Mary-Église, where one paratrooper by the name of John Steele was dropped in the completely wrong area. And he landed at the roof of this church, hurt his leg, and got stuck. His parachute got stuck, tangled on the top of the church, and he hung there for hours, pretending to be dead as the Nazis ran around the town. Eventually, they cut him down, found out he was alive, and then he escaped and went on to fight some more and retired to, I think, Wisconsin. Pretty cool story. So the plan was to do a bunch of stuff at the same time. The plan was paratroopers, and then gliders, and then land invasion, sea invasion at the same time, and create chaos amongst the Germans so that they couldn't get reinforcements to each other by cutting off communication. So it sounds like all of this was a failure. So how the heck was it a success? Basically, the Allies piled plans on top of plans. They accumulated a whole bunch of plans and strategies, a whole bunch of equipment onto one big mishmash, and they just did all of it in this interlocking mess of a plan. And a bunch of it kind of didn't work, but enough of it did work that overall they were successful. For example, after the paratroopers land, or the Jeeps and the gliders land, or the soldiers get inland off the beaches, they then encounter French farms. And the French farms are separated by hedgerows. So French farms are not separated by barbed wire fences or electric fences. These are ancient medieval hedges. These hedges are, I think, the thickest bushes you've ever seen that are 5 feet thick and 10 feet high sometimes. And they're full of thorns and brambles, and they're all very tangly, and you can't get through them. They're there to keep the cows and the sheep and everybody, the animals, all in their fields. It also means that each farm you go to is surrounded by a hedge that blocks everything out. So the fighting goes from street to street, from farm to farm, and you don't know when you go through the little opening in the hedge what you're going to see on the other side. So the Battle of the Hedgerows is the next couple of weeks that we're there's the beach landing, and then there's the Battle of the Hedgerows. That eventually, though, is a success because the Allies are able to bring in tons and tons of equipment. You can see in this picture here, tank tracks going across all these farms. You can't really get through a hedge with a Jeep, but if you have a tank, you can bust your way through at least some of the weaker parts of the hedges. This brings us to the mulberry harbors up here, which is the way we get equipment into France. So these little things are called mulberries, not little, big things are called mulberries. They're metal, and it's like this chunk right here, and then it floats on a boat. And then there's a chunk here, is another one, and it floats on a boat, and another chunk, and another chunk, and another chunk off into the distance. Each one of these is called a mulberry, and they have a road on them, and you want to think of them like giant 100-ton Legos. And they brought them in from Britain, and they assembled them, and you can see this giant ship here, and then a whole row of mulberries leading all the way to the coast. And here's a bunch of ships and some mulberries leading to the coast. And this is a way to bring trucks, tanks, heavy machinery, tractors, all kinds of stuff into France. These mulberry harbors, super effective. And remember, we said that Normandy was a stupid place to land boats because the boats can't get close to shore. The mulberry harbors kind of fix that. They aren't a permanent solution, though, and this is the evidence you can see today of one of those mulberry harbors that got swept up in a storm, and you can tell the chunks of it because they came undone at the boats here at these connecting points, and they got tossed around and stuck in the sand. This photo is from low tide. You can see they're all still stuck there. So how was it a success? This all sounds like failure, failure, failure. But when you add everything together, it was a success. How? Why? Technology, Mulberry Harbors, tanks, technology, gliders, paratroopers, jeeps, technology, subterfuge, intelligence, all of these things added together. All right, that is all for today. Why was it important for the Allies to invade Europe, and why did they do it at Normandy? Summarize everything, submit it, and I'll see you tomorrow.